I've got the H1, the H2n, the H5, and the H6. And I'm going to talk in this video not just about the recording quality, the audio quality, but also the build quality and the appearance of these devices, the features and the ease of use of these devices, the portability and flexibility of them, and we'll even get into some of the advanced scenarios. In the end, I'll wrap up by letting you know what I've decided to keep for my particular use, and hopefully that'll give you some insight and guide your purchase decision. All right, so one of the first and most important areas I've been looking in is audio quality. And when I first went into it, I really expected that the Zoom H5 and the H6 would be a big step up in audio quality, especially if we were going to use a high-end mic like the SSH6. What I found surprised me, which is that for my particular recording scenarios, which are I think very common, the audio quality was very, very similar. It didn't make a big jump. Just to give you a sense of that, I'll give you just some rapid fire here recordings in different scenarios. So let's start out. I'm going to play you some recordings taken with a lavalier mic, but plugged into each of the 4 different recorders. Let's take a listen. It was understood from the first that I should spend the night there. Years afterward, Giono recalled the turning point in his life. In 1935, a whole delegation came from the government. He was not dead. As a matter of fact, he was extremely spry. All right, now let's hear what these different recorders sound like on a tabletop mounted close to the speaker. The wind on its tiles made the sound of the sea upon its shore. When he had set aside a large enough pile of good acorns, he counted them out by tens. During his lifetime, Jean Giono, who considered himself to be Italian and provincial, the shepherd went to fetch a small sack and poured out a heap of acorns on the table. All right, now let's hear what they sound like when they're mounted on top of the camera and positioned 8 to 10 feet away from the speaker. In any case, I started toward it. It was the shepherd. Years afterward, Giono recalled the turning point in his life. The oaks of 1910 were then 10 years old and taller than either of us, and beech trees as high as my shoulders, spreading out as far as the eye could reach, confirmed it. So as you can hear, all of these scenarios sounded pretty similar across the different field recorders that we're evaluating. They all sounded really good on a lavalier mic, and they all sounded really good on a tabletop microphone setup, and they all sounded pretty mediocre when mounted on the camera 8 to 10 feet away. So for me, in these common scenarios, the audio quality is not a reason to pay the premium to upgrade to the H5 or the H6. The real advantage with the H5 and the H6 is going to come in when you start recording some more difficult recording scenarios. All right, let's take a look at the build quality and appearance of these different recorders. Starting with the clear winners, the H6 and the H5. There's no question that these two devices feel and look more professional than the other two. The H6 weighs more than a pound. It's got a rubberized, dense plastic finish. The rotary encoders feel smooth and offer even resistance. The metal finish at the microphone area is cool to the touch, and it clicks on with a satisfying snap. The buttons are all nice, even clickiness. It's a very, very high quality feeling item. Even the tripod mount connector is a metal recessed area, whereas on these two it's actually plastic. So in many, many ways, the feel of the H6, like the H5, is very much a professional feel. The build quality and appearance of the H2n is still nice, but it's definitely a step down from the H5 and the H6. I give it a B. It has a hefty feel, but it's only 6.6 ounces, so less than half the weight of the H6 and about half the weight of the H5, actually. The buttons all feel nice, though perhaps not quite as satisfying as the H5 or the H6. The mic selector on the top in particular feels a little squirrely. It's difficult to adjust, and it doesn't have quite the satisfying click, so I found myself looking quite often at the indicator lights to make sure that it was actually had the right microphone activated. It's made of a thin plastic, so it feels a bit more like it might chip or break if you were to drop it. The cage around the microphones on this device does make it feel like a higher quality item, and it looks a bit more like a condenser microphone or a dynamic microphone you might use in a studio. So it gets that appearance. As the piano black finish also really helps in the appearance department. When I mounted this on top of my camera, I thought it looked a lot better than the Zoom H1. I think it might have even been the best looking of the bunch. So a good looking device and a decent build quality, but definitely not top end. When we get to the H1, we're definitely taking a drop again. I gave this a C+ in my ratings. It's very, very light at 3.2 ounces. It's almost half the weight again of the H2n. The finish is a dark gray. It's listed on Amazon as black, but it's definitely a dark gray, so I don't know why they call it black. And it has kind of a speckled finish, so it's going to match with almost nothing you have. The cage around the microphones at the top in particular seems quite prone to breaking. It's very, very thin plastic. And the microphones themselves, I believe, may even be a painted plastic. That said, it's a very functional build quality and it looks just fine. I think particularly when you put a foam windshield on the front, it looks quite good mounted on the camera. So all in all, not the greatest build quality and appearance, but completely passable. Okay, let's talk about how easy it is to use each of these devices. Just to give you a sense, there's one giant button on the front. The button does record. There's no menu system. There's no settings to navigate on a screen and set up. Every single control on the device has a hardware button, and yet it's not overwhelming. It's very smart. In addition to the front record button, the least likely to be used settings on the back. These are the types of settings you're probably going to set once for a whole shoot and then not change them again. Are you going to record as WAV files or MP3 files? You'll probably set that maybe once the whole time you own the device if you have a preference. The side is the only other place with additional buttons, and here you'll find transport controls to play back your recordings, play, pause, forward and back, and a gain adjustment for your microphone, trash button to delete your recordings, and you'll find the smart toggler, which is on all of these Zoom recorders, which you can hold down to turn on and press up to hold. It's a very smart design that takes up very little space and gives you great confidence that the device will only be on when you want it to be on. My only complaint is the design decision they made to put the microphone input on the exact opposite side parallel to the headphone output. I must admit I've accidentally plugged in my lavalier microphone into the output more than a few times, and that would have been an easy thing to fix. But overall, an incredibly easy to use device. The Zoom H2n adds a bunch more features, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to use. But the design decisions that Zoom has made it about as easy as you could hope for. I'm particularly impressed by the way they designed the control for activating the internal microphones on the device. This device is capable of 4 different recording modes: mid-side, XY, 2-channel, and 4-channel, but it's very intuitive and easy to switch between them. To adjust to XY, you point this arrow at the XY. To switch to MS, you point this arrow at the MS. And if you want 4-channel mode, you point it at 4-channel mode. These indicator lights make it really obvious which microphones are active and what recording mode you're in. The other buttons on the outside mirror closely those on the Zoom H1, except given the complexity of this device, they've now added a menu system. So you'll find a new menu button on the side, and you'll find many of the features that used to be on external hardware controls on the H1 are now in the menu system on the H2n. Now personally, many of these features I wouldn't use. I wouldn't use a tuner on my recorder. I wouldn't use a metronome on my recorder. I'm just going to do that on my smartphone. There's lots of good apps that are going to be a lot easier to use and more full-featured than what you'd find built into your recorder. Additionally, I'm personally not interested to do compression or limiting on the recorder. I'm much more comfortable doing that back when I'm at my computer and I've got a full software suite with which to do it. You may be different. You may like to do some of those things in the field on the recorder, but for me, the marginal features they've added with the Zoom H2n are not that appealing. I would probably try different auto gain settings, and I might at different times want to do 4-channel recording, but some of these other features feel a little gimmicky to me, and they just add additional complexity. So for example, when I was testing this device, I used a lavalier mic, and I accidentally had plug-in power off, so the recordings were completely unusable. So sometimes there's a trade-off between more features and ease of use, and for myself, I felt that the new features with the H2n just made it a little bit more difficult to use in a way that wasn't beneficial to me. All right, let's talk about the ease of use with the H5 and the H6. These are considerably more powerful field recorders, so it's pretty impressive how easy to use they still are. You've got this new system of interchangeable mic capsules, so you have to think about which mic capsule you want to use. You have to make sure you've got the right track active and on, and then adding in XLR TRS ports means if you're going to use an outboard microphone, you've got to think about what kind of phantom power are you using. You've also got pad setting here with 20 decibels of gain. So definitely a little bit more complexity to think about, but in general, if you're someone who's in the market to deal with some of these more complicated recording scenarios, it's pretty impressive how easy to use both of these devices are. All right, let's talk about the portability of these devices, starting with the Zoom H1. This is clearly the portability king. It gets an A+. It weighs 3.2 ounces and it's very small. When you put it in your pocket, it feels like a cell phone, a little bit of a bulky cell phone, but it's not a big deal to have it there, which makes it really convenient to record with a lavalier mic. I'm also interested in getting a hip belt. I've tried a couple of different holsters and belt clips. I'll be sharing another video about that coming up. But that's a really good option with the Zoom H1. Mounted on a camera, you barely even notice it's there, but it weighs so little that it fits on there with ease. And if you're going to bring it in a backpack, you don't have to think twice about the bulk it takes up. It's very, very small. So the clear winner on portability. So let's talk about the portability of the Zoom H2n. This device, I dare say, is not going to go in most people's pockets. I have probably some of the bigger pockets around as a tall man. I have the typical large pockets you might find in jeans or khaki pants, and this isn't going in my pocket. You might be able to get away with a belt holster of some kind. I might take a look into that. So if you love this device and you want to try to put it in a holster, you'll probably figure that out, but it does weigh twice as much and it will be noticeable on your belt, whereas the Zoom H1 is so small and light, you might even be able to forget about it. Mounted on top of a camera, it does all right as well. It adds a little bit of bulk, but the center of mass is nice. And it looks good actually with the piano black finish. Is going to match most of your digital cameras. And throwing in a bag, it's pretty small. It's not the type of thing where you'll be too worried about the bulk of this device, so it's portable in that sense, but definitely not a pocketable device, which is interesting because it's almost there. It's just a little too thick and bulky. Let's talk about the portability of the Zoom H5. This is a new category, as you can probably guess. It weighs about twice as much as the Zoom H2n. You're not going to be putting this in your pocket. You might be able to get away with putting it on your belt and you figure out some kind of belt clip to mount into your tripod adapter. That might be something you can do, but you're going to feel like you've got a real big tool on your belt. If you want to mount it on your camera, that's also not an amazing option. I mean, if you've got a permanent studio setup and a large video camera and you're not going to be moving much, that's fine. But for me, someone who's shooting more mobile a lot of the time, I don't really like having this giant bulky field recorder on top. The other thing to keep in mind if you're going to mount it on top of your camera is if you're going to use XLR cables, those are going to run out the back, probably blocking some of the features of your camera and your view of the LCD screen on the back of your camera. In terms of bulk for putting it in a bag, it does come with this nice case for travel, and it's a pretty compact case. So I could imagine that if you were traveling somewhere with the primary goal of taking recordings, you would consider bringing this in your bag. It's not a total deal breaker for bulk. The Zoom H6 is obviously the least portable of the devices that I've tested. With the included XY capsule, it's weighing in at 1 pound, 3 ounces. So this is no small weight to carry around. You could consider mounting it to your belt, but it's going to be even bulkier and more unwieldy than the Zoom H5. It doesn't even really compare with something like the Zoom H1 in that regard. If you put it on top of your camera, it's going to be gargantuan up there, which again might be all right if you're in a permanent studio setup and you're using large equipment. One advantage it has for the camera mounted scenario is that the XLR outputs are going to run the cables off the side of your camera, which is perhaps less likely to block some of the critical features of your camera. In terms of bulk for travel, the Zoom H6 comes with this box, which is pretty substantial. We're looking at the size of a large dictionary or something like that. So when you put this device in here, pretty substantial. So it's going to be a bit bulky in your bag, and it's probably something you'll choose to leave at home if you've got the option. All right, let's talk about some of the scenarios where each of these field recorders really shine. Starting with the H6 and the H5, these recorders are obviously going to support some of the most difficult and demanding recording scenarios you can encounter. You're going to be able to run 4 or even 6 dedicated microphones in order to be able to position the audio exactly how you want it. So this could be particularly handy if you're going to record music. So with the H6, for example, you've essentially got a little mobile recording studio. You can go bring a whole kit with professional microphones and set it up so that you can record each of the different instruments and vocalists and have different gain controls for each of the different performers. It's also going to be fantastic for film and VR, where you can position surround sound recordings and really get a sense of which audio should be coming from which direction. It's going to be no problem at all for you to get the right microphone set up to be able to distinguish between your ambient sound, recording with something like a omnidirectional mic like this one that comes with the unit. And then maybe you can also get yourself a Shure SM58 running on a XLR cable and be able to record a dedicated speaker with greater focus. So a recorder like this is going to give you that flexibility for all of those more difficult recording scenarios. So let's talk about the scenarios that the H2n really shines in. It's not going to be quite as flexible as the H5 or the H6, but it does do a couple special things. One is it does 4-channel recording. That means that it's going to get a sense of front left, front right, rear left, rear right. And you can use that audio signal to combine with VR recordings, for example, spherical video, and then you've got audio to go with it. Or if you're going to do some basic surround sound for some home video projects or film projects you're working on, another thing you can do with this device that comes in the box is you can turn down the level of the ambient noise and turn up the level of your subject. This can be really handy if you're going to be recording out in nature and you want to be able to turn up the sound of the ambient noise to accentuate the crickets and the animals and the leaves rustling in the wind. But it can also be really handy if you're recording in a room with a lot of reverb or a place where you really want to tune down background noise from a crowd. So let's talk about the Zoom H1 in these advanced scenarios. It has nowhere near the flexibility of the H5 or the H6 or even the H2n. This is definitely going to be the area where it's held back. You're not going to want to use this microphone to do detailed miking of a band that's performing. You're not going to be able to get surround sound with this microphone, and you probably shouldn't even trust this microphone for trying to capture a vocalist singing who wants a really high fidelity recording. Those are limitations beyond the scope of what this microphone is really meant for. But it is fantastic in the studio for recording a single speaker, doing a product video, for example. It's really fantastic for casual video shooting with your family and friends if you're going to mount it on the camera. It's lightweight, it's easy in that circumstance. And it's actually really fantastic for 2-person scenarios. You can put it on the table and have a separate X and Y recording, which gives you the ability to focus in on your 2 speakers, or you can use it like a reporter and point one microphone at yourself and one microphone at the person you're interviewing. But if you're going to need to support some of these more advanced scenarios, you're going to want to opt for one of the more advanced recorders. So perhaps it comes as no surprise that the recorder that I've been actually recording into this whole time, as you've seen in these videos, is the one that I've decided to keep. It's the Zoom H1, and I'm also going to keep this giant squid audio lavalier. Now the reason is that for me, I've been very impressed with the audio quality, which easily rivals all of the competition for my particular recording scenario. I've been really impressed by how easy to use this is. I just love knowing there's this big red button on top that I can start recording with. And I really like how portable it is. I love being able to drop it in my pocket and walk around with it all day while I'm shooting. Even if I'm just at home here in my little home studio, it's just really convenient to know you've got that dialed and you're not always having to mic up and detach yourself from some bulky, larger recorder. So this is the clear winner for me. It doesn't hurt that it's only $100. I think it's worth every penny. Now, if for most of you out there, if you're shooting videos for YouTube and you're going to be mostly at home or even walking around outside, it's going to be one or two of you with mostly spoken audio, I really believe this is going to be the right microphone for you. I think if you're planning to pretty quickly get into VR, or you're a film student or someone else who's trying to do surround sound, then the Zoom H2n is probably worth the upgrade. If you're going to need to mic up a band and you've got high expectations for adjusting levels of different members of the band, or you're going to want to try to record someone from a long distance, you're probably going to need to jump to the H5 or the H6 to support those more advanced scenarios. So I hope that this comparison and review has helped you out. Please do click one of the links from my description to help support my channel if you are ready to make a purchase. And if you want to get a little more in depth, comparing particularly the audio quality of these different scenarios, you're going to find my channel has a lot of blind tests available where you can see for yourself what the audio quality of these different recorders is. All right, I've spent a lot of time with these recorders. I think I'm ready to put them to bed. So thanks for listening along with me and watching my video, and I wish you the best of luck.